Hi everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be looking at the books I read in 2020 and also my 2020 statistics. So first of all, we're going to start off on Goodreads and we're going to have a quick flick through the ones that I read. I'm going to point out my favourites. I didn't want to talk about all of the books that I read because a lot of people told me that they don't really watch those kinds of videos, so I'm just going to have a quick scroll through and then we're going to get onto the statistics and I'll share my screen and you guys can have a look at some really interesting charts and things. So let's get started. Okay, so I read 155-ish books in 2020. My spreadsheet says I read 157. Goodreads, I think, disagrees. So here's what we started with. My first book of the year was The Hand on the Wall, which I didn't love, to be honest. I thought it was a bit of a letdown. A Big Ship was also a letdown, and then it got better with One of Us Is Next, which I do have a full review for. I will leave it up above. Obviously, I'm staring at a screen right now, not looking at the camera. I was listening to audiobooks at the beginning of the year, which I couldn't really do later on because I didn't have the commute anymore, but that's a shame because I was really enjoying some of them. So here is when we get into February, which is when I tried to read 29 books in 29 days, and I did manage it, but a lot of them were graphic novels, as you will see. So that was my graphic novel month. I also reread The City of Brass for the third time, and of course I loved it. This was in preparation for The Empire of Gold because I received an art copy of it and I really wanted to get to it. Wicked Saints, which just pissed me off, it was awful. Harry Potter, we're not going to talk about that. And then here I read The Kingdom of Copper as a reread, and then I was immediately wanting to go into The Empire of Gold because it's such a good trilogy, and honestly it's made me cry. I've got a full review of The Empire of Gold up on my YouTube channel as well. Did a reread of The Dragon Republic. Or was that my first read? I think that might have been my first read actually. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I did a vlog for. Didn't enjoy that one, that was a letdown. And then we got into my Rainbow Challenge. In theory, you should be able to see here that it goes red, yellow, pink, blue, orange, purple, and green. Or no, this one was green, sorry, and then the Immortalist was blue, but I've got the wrong editions here. So this should have been a lovely rainbow colour, but it wasn't. I'm going to try again this year. Mexican Gothic, this was the start of the Space Sirens book club, which I'm a part of, and I love it. So that was our first book, and our first live stream went up about a month after that, I think. I read Homegoing, which is one of my favourite books of the year. White Fragility, which everyone else did, although I think I read this in August rather than June or July with everyone else. The House in the Cerulean Sea was another Space Sirens pick. Loved that, I thought it was really good. I want to reread it and then also get my hands on the next book that he's writing, which has a very similar cover, so I'm not sure if it's like in the same world. I'm not sure. Then we've got Jane Harper, who I love. You'll see here in October that I started reading a few more horror and sci-fi books. So obviously we've got The Reckless Life of Harriet Stoker, The Luminous Dead, The Carrow Haunt, The Turn of the Screw, because that's when The Haunting of Bly Manor came out. My first debut of 2021, this is my first 2021 arc that I read, Happily Ever Afters. The Bone Houses were really good, Pumpkinheads was cute, Rules of Vanishing was really good. I read a bit of fantasy, The Burning God, which was a major disappointment. I talk about that in another video. Then I started doing my childhood favourites rereads as well. Some were good, some were quite bad. I've done a vlog on it, but I haven't uploaded it yet, so I'll do that soon. And then we get into December. I read The Cousins, which came out that month. One Day in December, Five Total Strangers, and The Bear and Nightingale This Time Next Year. They were all parts of my buddy reading, and I did quite enjoy all of them, but I only gave them all 3 stars, I think, so it wasn't the most amazing buddy read. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder ended up being one of my favourites of the year, so I'm so glad I got to that in December. And then I read the sequel, which is already out in the UK but it's not out in the US yet. And then I did a reread here, and then I was also rereading Words of Radiance. So as you can see, a mixture of things. I got some thrillers, horror, sci-fi, non-fiction. My non-fiction reading did drop off at the end of the year, unfortunately, because of my lack of commute. And normally I listen to non-fiction as audiobooks. So now that we've looked at this, I read 157 books according to this spreadsheet, and I think it's accurate, I'm fairly sure. Let me just turn my screen recording on again so you can have a look at this, and I'll talk to you about my statistics kind of face to face. Okay, so this is what my spreadsheet looks like. As you can see, I've set the date range to include the whole year. We're going to ignore the stuff on the right hand side because I didn't really track my acquisitions past a certain point, so we're going to ignore that. But here is where we're going to look. So where do I start? Let's look. So here you can see my total amount of reading. So I read 157 books, and 134 of them were new to me books and 23 of them were rereads. And this is the most amount of rereads I have done, or I have read in a single year in forever, since I first started book blogging, I think, because I always want to read new books. so that I stay kind of on top of things. In 2020, I didn't even make a conscious effort really, I just really wanted to read some books again, so I did. You can see here it's broken down into books per month, so my best reading month was February, in which I read 29 books. That's only because I made it a challenge, and my lowest month was March. I think I was a bit burnt out really from the 29 books in February, and also that was the start of lockdown in the UK and work was just manic because we were trying to figure out how to get everything done. And then it slowly picks up again. August and September I was moving house or in the process of buying a house, so those months are a bit lower, and then it picked up again by the end of the year. So my average per month was 13 books. My average is usually 10, so this year, 2020 was a really good one. You can see here also pages per month. My most amount of pages were in February, which makes sense since that's when I read 29 books. My lowest, I think, is August, yeah, where I only read 2,600, and then September was a bit higher because I think I was reading more fantasy. We'll go into that in a minute. Okay, so now onto the charts. So I'm going to put them up here. I really enjoy looking at these charts. Hopefully you guys like these statistics too. So again, I'm looking at the screen because that's where all of my stats are. And let's start at the top, and that is with genre. So this is my genre breakdown. As you can see, contemporary was the most read genre. I read 31 contemporary books in 2020, and that is just contemporary, and that is all. So no romance, no thriller, no crime or mystery, no literary even, it's just contemporary. My next most read was thriller, which is about normal for me, and then it was equal between epic fantasy and science fiction. I actually made an effort to break this down a bit more instead of just saying SFF or speculative. I wanted to see exactly what subgenres I was reading. My least read, I think, was dystopia and suspense. Suspense isn't really something that I track. Historical was only 1 book as well, and dystopia was only 2. Normally I feel like I read a few more dystopia books than that, so this was quite surprising to me. I did read 4 post-apocalyptic books because it was just that kind of year. I think in the future I would like to read more post-apocalyptic, especially because my friend Maddie is doing a dystopian book club now, so she's reading, so the book club I think is reading a book every other month. And the amount of horror I read I am happy with, the amount of thrillers as well. I'm surprised that contemporary is the highest, though. I guess that was maybe because in the summer I only really wanted to read like contemporaries. But then if we switch over to pages by genre, it's a little bit different. You can see here that the amount of contemporary pages is overtaken by the amount of epic fantasy pages. So even though I read fewer fantasy books, I read more pages in that genre. So I read over 11,000 pages in fantasy, and I only read just over 10,000 in contemporary. And then thriller was coming up next with 8,800. Science fiction was next with 6,900. So I read more epic fantasy pages, and I guess I was in the worlds more, but I read more contemporary books. Next we have format, so I guess this is the next thing I'm going to show you. This is just the format in which the books were in when I read them. So I read the majority of my books as ebooks, and then followed by trade paperbacks, that published paperbacks. Next there were uncorrected proofs, which included ebooks and physical ARCs, but I wanted to split them up, so I wanted to see how many advanced readers copies I was reading, which wasn't very many in comparison. Let's see how many there were. There were only 26 apparently, but I feel like this may be wrong. I feel like I may have got them a bit mixed up with the ebooks. And then I only read 11 books as hardcover, which is something I've noticed about myself recently, is that I don't actually like reading hardcover books, and I know this is kind of ghastly to say on booktube, but I'm really not a fan of hardcover books. They're difficult to read, and with paperbacks you can get the floppy ones, and I prefer that. The length of the novels that I read were mostly actual novels. This chart isn't all that interesting to me because I kind of know this. So I read 141 actual novels, and then 14 graphic novels, 1 anthology, and 1 poetry book. I don't remember reading a poetry book, maybe I did. Next we have the split between physical books and digital books. So this is almost 50-50. I don't know, it doesn't actually say which one is which on this chart, which is quite annoying, but I imagine it's probably more physical, but only slightly. There's literally 5 books in it. Over the past few years I've been reading more and more ebooks, I've noticed, and I've been buying fewer and fewer physical books. That's partly a sustainability thing, and partly just because of lockdown, because I can't go to the bookshop as much, and the charity shops I can't browse, which is something that I would usually do in previous years. So up next is the chart of the page length. As you can see, the average size of the books that I'm reading is between 300 and 400 pages, which I guess is to be expected because I read a lot of YA. Well, I don't actually read a lot of YA, I'll show you. in a bit, but the YA books that I did read were probably between this range, and then slowly it starts to drop. So I did read one book that was almost 900 pages, one book that was almost 800, a few books that were between 600 and 700, and then I only read one short book. Next we're on to years published, so the year that the book was published. 2020 is of course the highest one because I read a lot of new releases in order to promote them. 2019 was the next highest, 2018, and then it's kind of a mixture in the early 2000s to 2016. Then I have one lone classic from before the 1920s. I don't read many classics. It's not really a goal of mine to read more, but I will read them if they're on my shelf. So yeah, I think the classic that I read was The Turn of the Screw because I wanted to read it after I'd watched Bly Manor. Next we have a chart that I'm very interested in, and that is my split by publisher. That said, I didn't fill in the last 10 or so books that I was reading in 2020, but I don't think it would have swayed this chart at all. I just got lazy and didn't want to fill in the charts. So as you can see, my most read publisher was HarperCollins at 22.7%, and that is probably to be expected. I'm surprised that HarperCollins was kind of lagging behind for the majority of 2020, but it seemed to catch up towards the end of the year. I was expecting this because I am auto-approved by Harper on Edelweiss, so I do get a lot of their advanced readers copies. The next highest one was Penguin Random House, which I wasn't expecting. I don't really know which books are written by Penguin or not, but I think I read a lot of their adult stuff. And then Hachette is slightly smaller. We have Titan Books hiding in their Quercus, which I don't really read much from. Tor, again, don't read much from. Quite a few different comics because I was reading a lot of graphic novels in February. A couple of books from Orion, a couple from Orbit. Simon & Schuster and Macmillan were both quite small this year. In 2020, sorry, I keep saying this year. It'll be interesting to see if this changes at all, especially with the acquisition of Simon & Schuster. Macmillan and Simon & Schuster don't often prove me on NetGalley or on EW, so it's very rare that I read their newest releases. They tend to be backlist. So the next one I have here is book status. This just shows what kind of book it was, like how I acquired it. So it's split between library, purchase, ARC, free and gift. Free and gift should be the same thing, but free also includes kind of bundles and books I got as free ebooks for whatever reason, or in a giveaway when that's not really a gift. So this chart's a bit messed up, but it shows the same thing. So almost a third of the books that I read were purchased by me, but slightly more were read as advanced readers copies, either ebooks or physical books. And then I got 22 books from the library, which is quite impressive considering my library was closed for most of the year, and it still is, unfortunately. So I'm not sure in 2021 how the library section is going to look. I really hope that I can start going back to the library again. I do have some reservations just sat there that I can't go and pick up because we're in lockdown 3. And then 24 of the books that I read were free. So I think that's a good mixture. I do want to read more of my purchased books in 2021. That's a whole thing that I talk about in my goals and my TBR videos, so that's a goal of mine. And I also want to read more advanced readers copies, but I am quite happy with this split, to be honest. And here you can see the split again, which ones were free and which ones were purchased. So the purchase one stays the same because obviously that hasn't changed, but the free ones includes the library books, the free books, the gifted books, and the ARCs because I didn't buy any of them. So I didn't actually buy that many books or read that many books that I bought in 2020 in comparison to the free ones, but what can you do? I am trying to change that, like I said. Next we have my ratings. So as you can see, my most common rating at 56 books is 3 stars, and that's, you know, an average rating, so it makes sense for me that it's average. My next highest rating is 4 stars. This is always the case for me. I'm quite good at choosing books for myself. There were 40 4-star books in 2020. There were also 16 3.5 stars, which were almost 4. No 4.5 stars, wasn't expecting that, and then 11 5 stars, and most of those were rereads. So they were like the Lock and Key books, I think a Saga book in there, definitely The City of Brass. So all 3 of those were 5 stars. The first 2 Poppy War books. Just over 30 books out of the 150 were 2.5 stars or below, so they're ones I didn't really like. So I think that's quite a good reading year, to be honest. Even though I didn't get many 5 stars, which are all-time favourites, I still read a lot of really good books. So this book's completed by month is something that I was talking about earlier when you saw my screen. So this just shows again the books that I read each month, and you can see that February is the highest by far, followed by December, because I had a really good reading month in December. I was really spurred on and I had a lot of time off work as well. I also read a lot in November and April and May. You can see the months that I was moving again, and March with lockdown the first. and getting into a bit of a slump after reading 29 books. I only read 8. Pages completed by month. Again, February is the highest. May is almost as high as December, almost, because I think I read a lot of fantasy books in May, so that would make sense. Next we have author gender. So this is something I do want to improve upon, just because I want to read more non-binary authors, because I really want to get their perspectives. But this also doesn't differentiate between trans male and trans female, so maybe that's something I would like to track in 2021. But it says here that I read 111 books, or 70% of my reading was by female authors, and then 27% of my reading was by male authors, and then a couple of non-binary authors as well. So again, this is to be expected. This happens every year, and I think it's slowly getting more and more centered around female authors, which I'm fine with. Next we have protagonist gender. I had a couple of books that had non-binary main characters, but they were also part of an ensemble, so that's not really differentiated between here. There is a bit of chart saying none, and that's because I had non-fiction books that I was reading, and obviously those don't have protagonists. I read very few books with male protagonists. I read a lot of books with female and a lot that had a mixture. Next we have age group, so intended audience. Now I think for the first time ever, maybe, the majority of the books that I read were adult books. And this wouldn't have been the case a few years ago. This is really, really interesting to me. I do see this carrying on in the future because I've been enjoying adult books a lot more than YA books in recent years, but I do still read quite a lot of YA, and I would like to continue doing that because I do enjoy it. Next we have my favourite chart, and that is country. So I'm trying to read books set in different countries, preferably own voices books, or at least by people who have actually done their research and have experience living or working in that country. You can see the chart here, which is skewed heavily towards the US, but you can also see that the US didn't take up the majority of my reading, which I am so happy about. It was only 44% of my reading, which is still quite a lot, but that's because I read a lot of books that are published in the US, and obviously most of them are set there. You can see that 56% of my reading, roughly, took place elsewhere. And now I'm going to show you the map, which shows you which countries I kind of covered, or which countries I read books set in. And yeah, I've explored a few different places. We've got Canada there, we've got USA, which is showing up as NA on my map for some reason, Russia, China, Australia, Egypt, Syria, got Greece, got Ghana, France, Ireland in the UK. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. I would like to continue to do this in 2021. In fact, it's actually one of my goals, which I mentioned in my goals video. I would like to read more sets in Asia, Eastern Europe, Africa, and particularly South America, because I haven't read any books set there. I think this map is a really interesting one to look at, and it's actually really easy to incorporate into your own spreadsheet as well. Most spreadsheets or reading spreadsheets that are shared by fellow booktubers or readers, bloggers, you can add your own column for country, and then you can just generate your own chart. It's really easy to do in Google Sheets. Let me know if you want me to show you how. Next we have diversity, which is kind of related to the map, but not entirely. One of the goals that I set midway through the year was to make sure that at least 2/3 of my reading was diverse reading, and I managed it. It was looking a bit iffy there in the first half of the year, but I did manage to do it. So 32% of the books that I read didn't have any diversity at all, and that's partly because 10 of the books that I read were non-fiction, and I think 2 of them were by black authors, so that's still 8 books that had no diversity at all because they were like about climate change and things. The next biggest part of the pie chart is actually combo, which is obviously a mixture of different types of diversity. So it could have, for example, a queer Asian main character, could have a disabled black character, or you know, any mixture thereof. I'm quite glad that combo is my highest. It means that I'm not just focusing on just one particular type of diversity. It means that the books that I'm reading are quite diverse in multiple different ways. We do have mental illness here, we have LGBTQ, we have race, which was the biggest one, outside of combo obviously. And then we have a really tiny one at the top that doesn't have a label, and I don't know what that is. It's not none, so that's the main thing. Next we have the 2 series breakdowns. The first one is series versus standalone. I read a lot more standalones in 2020, which is surprising to me because I used to read a lot of series, but I think now I get overwhelmed by how many there are. It's not great because I do want to keep running recaptains and recapping series, as many as I can. So I think I might try to up that a bit in 2021, but at the same time I need to finish off some series first. My series breakdown is almost evenly split, very, very nearly. So we have series I started, there were only 9, because again, I feel a bit uncomfortable starting too many series at the moment, it just intimidates me. We have 13 series that are ongoing, and we have 10 series that I completed. So I'm quite pleased that I completed 10, at least that's a nice round number, and hopefully I can do the same in 2021. And that's it, those are all my charts. Something that I really wanted to look at was to do a deep dive into my 5-star reads and my 1-star reads to see if there was any kind of comparison between them or similarities, so I could see like what is the reason I'm rating these books 5 stars or not, as the case may be. So these are the books that I rated 5 stars in 2020. So of course we have the City of Brass and Kingdom of Copper, Empire of Gold. These are all fantasy books, adult epic fantasy, and then related to that we also have the Poppy War and the Dragon Republic, which were also adult epic fantasy. So maybe I'm really into adult epic fantasy, except I also have Homegoing and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder in there. So out of the, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 books that I rated 5 stars. 2 of them were not fantasy, the rest were. So maybe fantasy books are my preferred genre, but I do sometimes like to branch out. So Homegoing is historical, kind of generational literary fiction, is how I would describe it, and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a YA thriller. That is the only YA book that is on this list. There are 2 middle grades, which is Beyond the Deep Woods and Harry Potter, both of which were rereads, but there's only 1 YA book, so this does tell me that I am slowly moving more towards adult books. Most of these books actually were rereads for me. I didn't find many new 5-star reads in 2020. The Light Brigade was new to me, Homegoing, Good Girl's Guide to Murder, so that's 3 out of 11 that were new to me. The rest were rereads that I really wanted to get to. So sorry, 4 because of the Empire of Gold. So that is slightly skewed. I think maybe if I hadn't reread so many books, then I wouldn't have as many 5 stars, but I maybe would have had more time to discover more books. Looking at them, most of these books have like a mixture of protagonists, so there's no real link between female or male protagonists for me. City of Brass, Homegoing, and The Way of Kings all have kind of like an ensemble cast, and the others are either female or male. I do only have 2 male authors in there though, the rest are female, so maybe I prefer female authors. At least that is what I'm getting from this. Now I'm going to move over to my 1 stars. Actually, let's have 1 and 1.5, and then we can see if there's any link between those. Okay, so I didn't actually rate that many books that low in 2020, which is good. Again, there doesn't seem to be any similarities between these, they're just bad books. So Rumours, Wicked Saints, The Water Cure, and Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging are all written by women. One's a fantasy, one's contemporary, one's dystopian, one's sci-fi, another contemporary there, one's middle grade. So I don't think my 1 stars really have any links between them. I think I just hated the books. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this trend continues in 2021. I'm gonna keep an eye on all of this and see if there are any links between them. So those are all of my stats. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any comments, any observations. I'd love to get into a discussion with you. Let me know if your 5 stars had any kind of links between them. I'm looking forward to sharing these stats with you again in 2021, except obviously new stats. Let me know if you want them more regularly. I can do them every quarter, I can do them every other month. I probably won't do them monthly because it's a lot of work, but I would like to do them at least quarterly. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll speak to you all in the next one. Bye.